Hidden Case Archives.
For 23 years, the rent was paid on time, every single month, without fail, but the door was never once opened, and when a stranger finally turned the key, what waited inside had been holding its breath for someone who never came. This is the story of Unit 114. The town is called Maple Hollow, a quiet place tucked in the middle of nowhere, the kind of town where everybody knows everybody, and nothing ever really happens. On the edge of it sits an old storage facility, gray metal doors, cracked concrete, a chain-link fence that hums in the wind. Most of the units there turn over fast. People move, people forget, people stop paying. But one unit was different, Unit 114. For 23 years, the payment arrived like clockwork, a check in the mail, always on the first of the month, never late, never short. And in all that time, the manager never once saw the renter. His name was Daniel, and he had worked that front desk for 19 of those years. He used to joke that Unit 114 was haunted, a door that paid its own rent, a ghost with good credit. Then, one cold March, the checks simply stopped. Daniel had watched hundreds of renters come and go. They would rent a unit, fill it with the pieces of a life in transition, and then, sooner or later, they would come back for it. A divorce, a move, a death in the family. Storage units are where life waits in between. But Unit 114 never waited for anyone. No one ever came to add a box. No one ever came to take one away. The doors simply stayed shut, year after year, while the rest of the world kept moving. Daniel waited. He sent the notices. 30 days, 60 days, 90. Nothing came back. No call, no letter, no explanation. Just silence where there had always been a check. And so, by law, the unit went up for auction. That is where Marcus comes in. Marcus was a quiet man in his 50s who bought abandoned units for a living. He had seen it all. Broken furniture, rusted tools, boxes of junk that people swore were treasure. He did not expect much from Unit 114. Just another gamble, just another locked door. But the moment the bidding started, something felt off. The other buyers backed away. They had heard the rumors. The unit that paid for 23 years and never opened. Some said it was cursed. Some said it was a crime scene waiting to happen. Marcus did not believe in curses. He raised his hand, and for $90, Unit 114 was his. The lock was old, rusted nearly shut. It took him almost 10 minutes and a pair of bolt cutters before it finally gave. He took a breath, and he lifted the door. The smell hit him first. Not rot, not decay. Thus, old paper, and underneath it all, faint and strange, the ghost of perfume. What he saw stopped him cold. This was not a storage unit full of junk. It was a room. A whole life, packed carefully into one small space and sealed away from the world. A child's crib stood against the back wall, still made up with a soft yellow blanket. A rocking chair sat beside it. A shelf of picture books, their spines never once cracked. Tiny shoes, lined up in a perfect row. A mobile of little paper stars hung from the ceiling, frozen mid-spin, gray with dust. A nightlight shaped like a crescent moon sat unplugged on the floor. A baby monitor, its battery long dead. A growth chart was taped to the wall, with not a single mark on it. The room had been made ready for a life that was meant to be measured here, inch by inch, year by year. A life that never moved in. On a small table sat a framed photograph, turned face down. Marcus lifted it. It showed a young woman, maybe 19, holding a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. She was smiling, but her eyes were already breaking. Beside the photograph lay other things, each one wrapped in tissue paper. A tiny hospital bracelet, the kind they fasten on a newborn's wrist. A half-knitted baby sweater, the needle still holding the final, unfinished row. And a small lock of dark hair, tied with a faded ribbon, sealed inside a little glass jar. Whoever lived in this room had saved every fragile piece of a single day. Everything in that room was clean. Everything was placed with care, as if someone had built a nursery, then locked the door and walked away. Marcus had bought 1,000 units in his life. He had learned to feel nothing. Boxes were boxes. Lives were lives. But standing in the cold light of Unit 114, something in his chest cracked open. He thought of his own mother, gone now for many years, and for reasons he could not explain, his eyes began to sting. Marcus stood in that doorway for a long time. He kept telling himself it was just stuff, but it did not feel like stuff. It felt like a held breath, a room waiting for a child who had never arrived. In the far corner, he found a steamer trunk, leather straps, brass buckles gone green with age. He knelt down, unfastened them, and lifted the lid. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, each one sealed in its own envelope, each one addressed in the same careful handwriting, and each one carried the same name, "To my dear Rose." There were no stamps. Not one of them had ever been mailed. 23 years of letters, written and sealed, and never sent. Marcus picked up the envelope on top. The ink had faded to a soft brown. He slit it open, and he began to read. The first letter was dated more than 2 decades earlier. It began, "My dear Rose, today you are 1 year old. I do not know where you are tonight, but I hope someone is singing to you. I hope you are warm. I'm sorry. I will explain everything one day, when I am brave enough to mail this." It was signed, simply, Mom. Marcus sat down on the cold concrete floor, and he kept reading. The letters came once a year, always near the start of spring. Each one marked another birthday. Rose is 2. Rose is 3. Rose is 4. A mother, counting the years of a child she could not see. But there were no answers in them, only questions. Who was Rose? Where had she gone? And why would a mother write to her daughter every year for 23 years and never send a single word? Marcus could have sold it all. He could have thrown the letters away. Instead, he carried the trunk home, and he decided he was going to find out who Rose was. He started with the name on the lease, the woman who had paid for 23 years. Her name was Eleanor Hart. He searched for her online. At first, nothing at all. Then, a small obituary, printed that same cold March. Eleanor Hart had passed away at the age of 71. No husband, no children listed. The notice said she had been a seamstress. It said she was a private woman. It said she would be quietly missed. That was when the checks had stopped, because the woman writing them was gone. But the obituary said no children. So who then was Rose? Marcus drove back to Maple Hollow. He sat with Daniel at the front desk and asked him everything he could remember. Daniel said the rent had always come from a post office box across the county line. He had never met her. In 19 years, he had never even heard her voice. So Marcus tracked down that post office box. The clerk who had worked there the longest remembered the checks well. Every month, an older woman would come in alone, mail a single envelope, and leave without a word. She always paid in cash. She never gave a return address. The clerk said she seemed kind, and she always seemed sad. He called the county adoption agency next. A tired clerk told him the file was closed, the records sealed, and that even if Rose existed, the law would never let him near her name. So Marcus went to the town library. He spent 3 full days going through old records, old papers, old microfilm, and slowly, a different story began to take shape, a darker one. He found a newspaper clipping from decades back. A woman named Eleanor Hart, questioned in connection with a missing infant. The headline was cruel. It hinted that a frightened young mother had given up a baby under a cloud of suspicion. The town had whispered. The town had judged. For a moment, Marcus thought he finally understood. He thought maybe Eleanor had done something terrible. Maybe Rose had been taken from her. Maybe the nursery was guilt, and the letters were a confession written across 23 years. It was a false lead, but it felt true, and it almost made him stop. Then he found a second name. Tucked inside one of the later letters was a different handwriting. A man's, a short, hard note, signed only with the letter J. It read, "Eleanor, you have to let her go. For her sake, please stop." Marcus felt the ground shift again. Was this a husband? A lover? Someone who knew the whole truth? For a week, he chased the man called Jay. He found an old address that led to an empty lot. A phone number long disconnected. A trail that simply stopped. Another dead end. He was ready to give up. The story had too many holes, too many shadows, too many names that went nowhere. And then he read the last letter in the trunk. It was different from all the rest. The handwriting was shakier now. The date was recent, just a few weeks before Eleanor died. It said, "My dear Rose, I am old now. I am tired, and I am finally brave. When I was 19, I was alone, and I was afraid, and I could not keep you. I let a good family take you, so you could have the life I was never able to give. They asked me to disappear, so I did, but I never once stopped being your mother. Every year, I built you a room. Every year, I wrote you a letter, and every year, I was too frightened to mail it, because I was certain you would hate me. If you are reading this now, it means I have finally run out of time. Please forgive me. I loved you every single day." There was no crime. There was no scandal. There never had been. Eleanor had been a terrified teenager who gave her baby up for adoption. The newspaper had it wrong. The whispers had it wrong. The man called Jay had simply been an old friend, begging a grieving woman to stop punishing herself. For 23 years, Eleanor had paid for a room she could not bear to enter and could not bear to lose. A nursery for a daughter who was already grown. A monument to a love she never got the chance to give. Marcus knew then exactly what he had to do. He had to find Rose. He started with the adoption records. They were sealed. He hit wall after wall after wall, but buried inside that last letter was one final clue. Eleanor had written down the name of the hospital and a date. Marcus made calls. He wrote letters of his own. He explained again and again that he was not asking for money. He only wanted to deliver something. Months went by, and then, one quiet afternoon, his phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to a woman. Careful, guarded. She said her name was Rose. She was 43 years old. She had always known that she was adopted, and all her life she had wondered about the woman who gave her away. She had been told her birth mother had not wanted to be found. She had spent decades believing she had simply never been wanted at all. Marcus told her, gently, that she was wrong. He drove 300 miles to meet her. He carried the heavy trunk up to her front door, and he placed 23 years of letters into her hands. Rose opened the very first one right there on the porch. My dear Rose, today you are 1 year old. She read them all, one by one, on the floor of her living room, late into the night. Some letters made her laugh. Most of them made her weep. In them, her mother had described the life she imagined for her. A first day of school, a graduation, a wedding she would never be invited to. All of it written as if she had been there for every single moment. A mother she thought had forgotten her, who had, in truth, never once let her go. The next week, Rose drove to Maple Hollow. She found a small grave with a plain gray stone. Eleanor Hart. She knelt down in the wet grass, and for the first time in her entire life, she said the word out loud to the woman who had earned it. The Unit 114 is empty now. The crew, the rocking chair, the little paper stars, they live in Rose's home today, in a room she made for the mother she finally came to know. Not through a voice, not through a hug, but through a stack of letters that waited 23 years to be read. A door that paid its own rent. A ghost with good credit. In the end, it was never a ghost at all. It was a mother, still loving, still waiting, still hoping that one day, someone would finally open the door. So here is the question I cannot stop thinking about. How many people are out there right now, loving someone from a distance, too afraid to ever say the words? And how many letters get written, but never sent? If this story moved you even a little, tell me down in the comments. Would you have opened that door? Subscribe and stay close, because the next story I have for you is one you are not going to believe really happened.